Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, Alias Tagay. Well, we got some kind of interesting stuff going on here. We have Carney out all over the, European continent, kissing butt and trying to promise deals that were getting laughed at, literally getting laughed at. And now, of course, with the last 10 years that we've had of embarrassments, and our own, we'll call it propaganda war that we've allowed ourselves to perpetuate into the catastrophe of Ukraine, as well as all of the corruption from the bottom right to the top of our own country. Canada is not only the laughingstock of the world, nobody trusts us. Everybody is now gunning for us, and each country has a unique reason to despise us and, kind of, throw us to the wolves, because they see what's going on and they're going to try to take advantage of the weakened state that we're in. And of course, Carney, because he's such an idiot, yes, and so married into this general role of money over moral that he is literally selling Canada's soul under false promises for wealth. Now, that all being said, I'm going to start, and I try to always, it's Canadian Citizen Journal. I try to focus on the Canadian issues. But a lot of times a person has to go outside of the box in order to understand the reality of what's going on. Now, Trump had a cabinet meeting. I'm going to play some excerpts from this. And as usual, kind of do a little bit of bobbing and weaving and joining the threads on what's going on, as well as dabbling with a little bit of the idiocracy of what Canada has become, and just expose the truth, the embarrassment of decades of ignorance, allowing certain extremists to not only infiltrate and build empires within our nation, but become politicians that are pushing this bullcrap narrative that's taking hundreds of thousands of lives. And it's ongoing. Let's just dive right in with Trump.
But when you look at this, you understand why it's 50 billion. So this is one he's building in Louisiana. That's Meta, Facebook, as people understand it to be. But look at that, that's the size of Manhattan. So that's superimposed over the island of Manhattan. It takes up a big part of Manhattan. I think they say 81% of Manhattan. So these are big things, and they're going up. A lot of them are going up now. I don't know that big. Actually, Mark is building 4 of them, and others are building similar places. And when these things open up, I'll tell you what, our country, we're leading China now in AI, substantially leading China. And the reason is because we're letting them build their own electrical facilities. We would need double the energy that if you take all of the electricity that we produce right now in this country, you'd have to multiply it times 2 or maybe 3 times. So 3 times more than we have right now for everything, to operate your toaster and everything else, okay? 3 times more. And the way we are able to succeed, because China goes out and builds these massive plants. They're right now building 58 coal, in this case, almost all coal-fired plants. And coal is back with this country too, by the way. You know, there's a reason they use it, because it's good. It works for them.
So those are AI centers. $40 to $50 billion a piece. And the reason they're building them in the States is, first of all, Trump is freeing energy. And second of all, he's given permission by deregulating a lot of crappy government tax regulations. This is what Canada's problem is our taxes have just destroyed us. This socialist ideology that you give more than half you give your entire life away to receive pittance. It destroys any chances of real personal wealth, let alone the fact of companies to grow and become super corporations. This is why United States, of course, is the number one economy and has the number one military on the planet. As well as that, he's given them the ability, by backing free speech, to proceed in, well, being the global leaders in social media, which guarantees all of these different outlets. Pardon me, my phone's going off. I had a family emergency go down, so. To be the leaders around the world with these social media outlets like Facebook, which in Canada were heavily censored, but this is part of the tariff thing because, as I've said on previous episodes, and I urge you, if you're a new viewer, to check out my previous episodes, they have already written up a letter on Canada's breach of human rights. They're part of the negotiating with Canada is all of these censorship bills against their social media outlets and news agencies and all the rest that fall in line.
And we call it clean coal. We don't call it coal. We call it clean, even very clean coal. But we have coal going up. We have nuclear going up. Nuclear is very much in vogue now. It's safe and inexpensive and great. We don't allow windmills. We're not allowing any windmills to go up. I mean,
now, that's a Canadian invention, clean coal. Something that just when we had pretty much perfected it, the Liberal Party shut down because they couldn't make profit off of it. It's not about being green, people. The Liberals only care about one thing: taxing us into oblivion to pay for nothing that we ever get back in return, because none of their stuff ever works. It's all a waste of money. It's all laundered. It's all stolen. But also it gives them the power through regulatory processes to use these laws to benefit the people who keep them in power or whom they're invested with. And now, of course, like I've said and proven on previous episodes, Carney. He's already benefited. He's already been in a conflict of interest at least 6 or 7 times by policies he's set in. So, and there's more to come. Trust me. Oh yeah, there's more to come because, well, they just gave themselves the power through Bill C-5 to pretty much pick anything they want, not have to ask, and just push whoever's in the way out of the way. This is going to happen to Canada. In the meantime, the States is going the exact opposite direction. They're freeing the people. They're removing the burden of taxes. They're lowering the price of not only living, but of the resources needed in order to work, get to work, heat themselves, grow and produce things, to be able to sell it at a cheaper rate than other countries, while the whole time making a very good wage. Canada, the exact opposite.
This is a legal situation where somebody committed to it a long time ago. We don't allow windmills. And we don't want the solar panels that I was speaking with the secretary about, because they take up, thousands of acres of our farmland. You see these big ugly patches of black plastic that comes from China. And the solar is, I like solar in some ways, but for firing up your big plants, it doesn't work. It's very unstable, but it really takes up your farm. The farmers are saying, they're building these massive blotches in the middle of the fields all over the country. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. So we're not heavy into that at all. And windmills, we're just not going to allow them. They're ruining our country. They're ruining everyone. If you look at, I hate to mention countries, but you look at the UK, what's happened at UK, they have energy costs have gone through the roof. It's because of wind. They want to do everything, close up the northern parts of the country. They have oil that's tremendous, and they closed it up. And I tell them, you're my friends, but man, you're gonna have a bad awakening very soon. It's gonna be very bad. They're ugly. They don't work. They kill your birds. They're bad for the environment. And if you look at them from a house, your house is worth less than 50%. So I'm trying to have people learn about wind real fast, and I think I've done a good job, but not good enough, because some countries are still trying, and they're destroying themselves. Those are countries that are really destroying themselves. I hope they get back to fossil fuel, because right now, Chris, whether we like it or not, fossil fuel is the thing that works, and then you can add nuclear with it and other things, but fossil fuel is what works if we're going to fire up those big monster factories.
You can throw Canada right into what he just said. Gonna scroll ahead a little bit.
They had to go for years. I was with a very great gentleman from Eli Lilly. I think he's an incredible executive. I'll mention the company and I'll mention him, because we had this argument my first term, and then we had it in my second term. In my second term, I wouldn't stop until I won the point, and he threw up his hands. He says, "You're right, I can no longer defend it. I can no longer defend that a pill that's made by Johnson & Johnson in a factory, in the same factory in the United States versus a place in Europe or other places, including Canada, by the way, you could buy it for 10% or 15% or 20% the cost of what we're paying, where we'd pay 5, 6, 7 times more money." He said, "It's the hardest part of my job, defending that. I'm not going to do it anymore." I'm saying that we have to get down to business. And that's a great company. He's done a great job, and I appreciated it. And it really broke the ice, because they were sending, well, we have to do research and development. Well, you have to do it for Germany and all these other countries too. Well, they think the United States should bear it. I mean, I heard this stuff and I finally said, it's over. Now, you have to have somebody that can get these countries to do it. I told them, if you don't do it, we're going to charge you a 25% tariff on everything you send into our country. That's much more money than what we're talking about. Then we have to get the drug companies to do it, and they'll do it because we have tremendous power over the drug companies too. So we're going to get it done. I just hope we get it done fast, Bobby, because this thing should go fast. But we're going to get the cost of medicine is going to be 1,000%. Think of that, not 2%. And I just tell this last story. When I was in my first term, in my last year, I was so proud of myself, because drug prices went down for the first time in 28 years under my administration. You know how much it went down? 1/4%. And I was so proud of that. And I held a news conference, I think you'll be able to find it, congratulating myself and my administration, because for the first time in 28 years, drug prices went down 1/4%. That is tiny, but it still went down. And I thought it was great. And then I realized, it's a very complicated business and formula. You got to be very smart. I said, we're really getting ripped off by the whole world. The whole world is ripping us off. And what happened is, I got on this kick, and I got the drug companies to agree, and I got countries to agree. And they're not agreeing because they think I'm a nice person. They're agreeing because I will put charges and costs and tariffs onto them that will be many times more than what they're going to be paying. So The companies are there and the countries are there, and we got to get it done, Bobby. We got to get it done, and we're going to have the biggest price of it. Now, that's going to lower Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. This is going to lower everything.
He's absolutely correct. It is going to lower everything. This is the brilliance of Trump. Love him or hate him, this is the brilliance of what he is doing for America. And we're in the crosshairs because, well, we share the same landmass.
We're all working together on this issue. We're meeting together. There are right now 11 wind farms planned that were launched during the Biden administration. Between Maine and Virginia, it's 1,130 towers. These towers are twice the size of the Washington Monument. The blades on them are
They're massive. It's so crazy.
The blades are 350 feet long, one blade. One of these blades blew up on Nantucket last summer, and the water was filled with shards of glass, of sharp glass, so it's dangerous to swim. They had to close the beaches, but they have indemnified themselves so the local communities can't sue them. None of these projects are bonded. If you build an oil derrick in the Gulf, you got to put a bond down. There's no bond for dismantling them, and that's one of the tools that Doug is now using to challenge some of these projects. None of the cost of energy from these projects is 39 cents a kilowatt hour. The average cost in this country is 17 cents per kilowatt hour.
And natural gas is 3 cents.
Right. So it is the most expensive energy. I've been representing commercial fishermen for 40 years. They are so excited about what you're doing, Mr. President, because their fisheries are being wiped out. As soon as they begin construction, the groundfish fisheries just disappear. The fish leave the area. They've killed 160 whales in the last 2 years. So they're wiping out the whale population, the Atlantic whale population, the big whales, the minkies, the gray whale, or the humpback whales, the right whales. And you are going to save the whales on the East Coast because of this. And you're going to save these economies that are based upon commercial fishing. I'll say one other thing about fishing. We are now, the South Asian nations are now dumping shrimp on our country. The shrimp is heavily contaminated. We just stopped a shipment that was contaminated with cesium-157, which is radioactive. They're farming these shrimps, and they use bactericides and antibiotics and all kinds of chemicals, and the shrimp are so contaminated that the European nations won't take them, so they're dumping them all here, and they're putting out of business. We have the most sustainable, highly regulated fishery in the world. What our fishermen do is a good thing. And all the trawlers in the Gulf and Alaska are being shut down because we're getting shrimp dumped here. So we have now increased FDA inspections of shrimp to make sure that Americans are not buying and eating contaminated shrimp and putting our shrimpers out of business.
Now, the windmills, this has all been proven. There is a vibration that is put off that throws the sonar off of fish. And somehow with whales, it blinds them in some way. Now, there's a lot of science still going to it. All they know is they have correlated the numbers. They know about the resonance causing effects because they can literally map out these areas. And when they put these windmills in the water, all of these detectors that detect the fish within the moment they start construction, the fish are already, of course, leaving the area. But once the windmill starts to turn, all life flees the area. That's a scary thing. And then, of course, when it comes to the mammals, the whales and these large specimen, somehow it blinds them, deafens them, kind of does something to the radar, as well as, I guess would be their cochlea, what gives them their balance, their natural form of direction. And they run into things, or they run aground. And this curve is proven. Science knows it. And what is Canada, the Green Party Liberals, doing? What are they doing out east? Windmills in the ocean. Completely backwards science. And the reason they get away with it is because of propaganda. And they teach the same propaganda in schools. We're going to move ahead.
Regarding crime in DC, something that might help especially ladies is being able to carry. I know you talked about reciprocal carry. Would you like for that to apply here in Washington, DC?
When you say carry, I assume you're talking about carry what we're talking about,
Concealed
right?
or-
In other words, carry a gun. Is that right? Would you like to carry a
I
gun?
would like to, yes, sir.
You'd feel a hell of a lot better, right?
I absolutely.
I agree with you 100%, okay?
Okay, great.
But I'll tell you, within another couple of weeks, it's hard to believe what's been accomplished in 12 days, but within another couple of weeks, you won't have to carry. You're not going to have to carry. You're going to be safe. People
Now, certain states, through their own laws, have removed the entirety, because everybody under the United States falls under the Constitution. Now, you can set certain bylaws, do certain things within, but you're, as a state, not allowed to break the Constitution. A lot of blue states have broke the Constitution by putting in laws not allowing people to carry a firearm. And it just so happens that all of these states have the highest crime, murder, what they do to women. I don't want to say the word. I'm already going to get censored because there's some other words on here. They're the nastiest places to live. DC is one of them. Trump's challenging that. He's going to give the right to carry back to the people. And I believe the way that he's doing it, just from threads and stuff that I've read, and different types of articles and stuff that have kind of had interviews with people involved in this, they're going to force all of the United States to abide by the Constitution. And that takes away all of the laws stopping a person from defending themselves. So this is great news. And again, why did I play this clip? Because everybody's talking about Castle Law. You want to see crime go down? Allow legal, trained firearms owners the right to carry and defend. Watch how fast crime falls. This is the one missing kind of step that the states doesn't really have. Some states have where it's not that they necessarily have to register for the firearm, but they do have to have a license. So you have to actually be trained and have a license. In other places, you don't. I mean, you can just go and you can buy, as long as you're over the age of 18, you don't have to give your name, you don't have to give nothing. You can do what you want. Now, as a libertarian, I believe freedom is freedom, but there is a connectivity to that where you see where people who have to put themselves through a series of tests and be checked to ensure that they're good citizens. In those states, crime are all-time low in the United States. It's the ones where anybody can buy that are still lower than the ones where they ban you from carrying. So the kind of the three steps. We have the cure for that. The only problem is we've got the wrong government and a propaganda machine that's in the process of trying to take away our right to, have long rifles, let alone the fact that they've banned handguns. And we've never been allowed to carry them around since a long time, but way before I was born, which is completely crazy. You want to protect yourself? It doesn't matter who breaks into your house. Chances are, first of all, they're going to get you by surprise. You're going to get you when you're sleeping, or they're prepared and you're not. Why? Well, because the only way you could be prepared is if you don't have things under lock and key, and the pew-pews that go in the boom booms have to be kept in separate storage. You'll never be able to do it all in time to protect yourself. Leaves you completely vulnerable. And I personally believe somebody breaks into your house, you have full right to shoot, shovel, and shut up. If they broke into your house, I believe in castle law 100%. Let me know how you feel in the comments. That's how I feel. Moving on.
And I have a question for Steve Witkoff, if I may.
Yeah.
This past weekend, Sergei Lavrov was saying that Putin will not sign a peace deal with Zelensky because Russia views him as illegitimate. I'm just wondering if the Russians had been relaying this to your team, if they view Zelensky, as a leader worth signing a peace deal with, if they will go to the
Doesn't matter
table.
what they say. Steve can answer, but I can answer too. Doesn't matter what they say. Everybody's posturing. It's all bullshit, okay? Everybody's posturing. Steve, do you have a different answer?
I agree with you, sir.
Exactly. We're going to dabble a little bit more into that right away. So, first, I'm going to play this clip. This is disgusting. This is not only propaganda, this is somebody who would sell their own mother while he's selling Canadians out for profit. And I'm going to first bust a lie, and then I'm going to slap the entire Canadian government around. Let's start with Carnage Carney.
Now, and the funds are flowing. So it's this is immediate. We know the immediate needs, and we, as a partner of Ukraine, are working directly, for example, in joint production, which you just referenced, but then more broadly buying in drones from other sources, and also following the Danish model, the pre-financing model, for production here in Ukraine. With respect to security guarantees, I think we all recognize that the core of the security guarantee, the front line, the foundation, is a robust Ukrainian armed forces. And it's crucial in those regards that the military equipment today and tomorrow is here, the industrial capacity is here. It's crucial that the training capacity is there as well. And I'd note that since Russia's illegal seizure of Crimea, Operation Unifier, which Canada put in place, has trained over 45,000 Ukrainian troops. This will become even more important going forward. That's the front line, but that's should be buttressed by the coalition of the willing, potentially the United States, in matters of intelligence and other support. We are working through
Coalition of the Willing is right out of the Socialist Playbook. These are very closely linked, small kind of titles, groups of words, in order to make people feel as though it's the right thing to do, that they're part of the right group. This is the same ideology that Hitler used, the exact same playbook. And again, I'm going to weave this all together here really quick.
With our allies in Coalition of the Willing and with Ukraine, the modalities of those security guarantees on the land, in the air, and the sea, and I would not exclude the presence of troops. Yeah. We need assess.
He will not exclude putting Canadians, troops, on the ground. What the United States has already refused to do, and there's a reason the United States refuses to do it, and there's a reason that Trump is negotiating the way he is, and why Putin is being very hardline on what he wants before he has a ceasefire. We're going to break it down. Listen carefully.
The Ukraine war. This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990, February 9th, 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward. if you agree to German unification, basically ending World War II. And Gorbachev said that's very important. Yes, NATO doesn't move, and we agreed to German unification. The US then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on basically a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power. And Clinton was the first agent of this. And the expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. At that point, Russia didn't much care. There was no border other than with the Königsberg, but other than that, there was no direct threat. Then the US led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was bad, by the way, because that was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart. The Russians didn't like that very much. But Putin became president, they swallowed it, they complained, but even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually asked maybe we should join NATO when there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship. Then 9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you, we understand, to root out terror. But then came two other decisive actions. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. This was probably the most decisive event, never discussed in this context. But what it did was trigger the US putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat to national security by making possible a decapitation strike of missiles that are a few minutes away from Moscow. And we put in two Aegis missile systems. We say it's defense. Russia says, how do we know it's not Tomahawk nuclear-tipped missiles in your silos? You've told us we have nothing to do with this. And so we walked out of the ABM treaty unilaterally in 2002, and then in 2003 we invaded Iraq on completely phony pretenses, as I've explained. In 2004-05, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine, the so-called First Color Revolution. It put in office somebody that I knew and I was friends with, and am kind of distantly friends with President Yushchenko, because I was an advisor to the Ukrainian government in 1993, 94, 95. And then the US had its dirty hands in this. It should not meddle in other countries' elections. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election and he became president, and in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine. That calmed things down because the US was pushing NATO, but the people of Ukraine on the opinion polls didn't even want to be in NATO. They knew that the country is divided between ethnic Ukrainian, ethnic Russian. What do we want with this? We want to stay away from your problems. So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. A typical US regime change operation, have no doubt about it. And the Russians did us a favor. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland, my colleague at Columbia University now, and if you know her name and what she's done, have sympathy for me. Really. Between her and the US ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, who's a senior State Department official till today, and they talked about regime change. They said, who's going to be the next government? Why don't we pick this one? No, Klitschko shouldn't go in. It should be Yatsenyuk. Yes, it was Yatsenyuk, and we'll get the big guy, Biden, to come in and do an attaboy, they say, pat him on the back. It's great. So they made the new government. And I happened to be invited to go there soon after that, not knowing any of the background. And then some of it was, in a very ugly way, explained to me after I arrived how the U.S. had participated in this. All of this is to say, the U.S. then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. It's been, by the way, I forgot to mention, in 2004, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries in the not 1 inch eastward. And then, okay, it's a long story, but the U.S. kept rejecting the basic idea, don't expand NATO to Russia's border in a context where we're putting in goddamn missile systems after breaking a treaty. 2019, we walked out of the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. In 2017, we walked out of the JCPOA, the treaty with Iran. This is the partner. This is the trust building. In other words, it's completely reckless U.S. foreign policy. On December 15, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. You can find it online. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement. I called the White House that next week after that, begging them, take the negotiations. Putin's offered something, avoid this war. Oh, Jeff, there's not going to be a war. Announce that NATO's not going to enlarge. Oh, don't worry, NATO's not going to enlarge. I said, oh, you're going to have a war over something that's not going to happen? Why don't you announce it? And he said, no, our policy is an open door. This is Jake Sullivan. Our policy is an open door policy. Open door for NATO enlargement. That is under the category of bullshit, by the way. You don't have your right to put your military bases anywhere you want and expect peace in this world. You have to have some prudence. There's no such thing as an open door that we're going to be there and we're going to put our missile systems there and that's our right. There's no right to that. We declared in 1823, Europeans don't come to the Western Hemisphere. That's the Monroe Doctrine. The whole Western Hemisphere, after all. Okay, anyway, they turned down the negotiations. Then the special military operation started. And 5 days later, Zelensky says, okay, neutrality. And then the Turks said, we'll mediate this. And I flew to Ankara to discuss it with the Turkish negotiators because I wanted to hear exactly what was going on. So what was going on was they reached an agreement with a few odds and ends. And then the United States and Britain said, no way. You guys fight on. We got your back. We don't have your front. You're all going to die. But we got your back as we kept pushing them into the front lines. That's 600,000 deaths now of Ukrainians since Boris Johnson flew to Kyiv to tell them to be brave. Absolutely ghastly. So when you think about your question, we have to understand we're not dealing with, as we're told every day, with this madman like Hitler coming at us and violating this and violating that, and he's going to take over Europe. This is complete bogus, fake history that is a purely PR narrative of the U.S. government. And it doesn't stand up at all to anyone that knows anything. And if you try to say a word of this, I got completely cut out of the New York Times back in 2022 after writing my whole life columns for them. Oh, I'd send this, okay. And by the way, online, it's not even space. You know, there's no limit. They could publish 700 words. They would not publish, since then, 700 words for me about what I saw with my own eyes about what this war is about. They won't do it. We're playing games here. So, God forbid a nuclear power comes at us. I don't know what's going to happen. But we came at them. And we should stop going after China and Taiwan.
Now, for my new viewers, my regular viewers and subscribers have probably already watched this documentary. It's called Ukraine on Fire. I urge you, take the time. I will post, as always, all the links in the description below. Watch Ukraine on Fire. It is the closest thing to the truth you will find about Ukraine and the geopolitical mess that has caused all of the carnage and death that's been going on there. And I know this because my family fled Ukraine in World War II. And it all started with a guy who owned and ran newspapers, who was an editor, who worked and was a true believer of the Nazi regime. We're going to get to that right away. Now, we're going to train Ukrainian soldiers once again. Here's something not a lot of Canadians know.
With the media focused on the violence in Israel and the Gaza Strip, the war in Ukraine has been relegated to something of a sideshow. However, as a nation, Canada remains one of Ukraine's staunchest supporters as that nation continues its bloody struggle to oust the Russian invaders. However, it's time to target whether or not Canada is actually training neo-Nazis at the same time. To date, Canada has donated more than $8 billion to Ukraine's war effort, with $2.4 billion of that aid being in the form of weapons and munitions.
This is 1 year ago, this video.
There are presently over 300 Canadian Armed Forces members assisting with the NATO training of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in both the UK and Poland. It is estimated that through Op Unifier, the mission to provide military training and capacity building to Ukraine, the CAF have trained nearly 40,000 Ukrainian recruits since 2015. Throughout that lengthy period of close cooperation, there has been a recurring issue involving the presence of neo-Nazis within the ranks of some units of the Ukrainian military. By the time the CAF instructors began deploying to Ukraine in 2015, Azov had already been absorbed into the official Ukraine National Guard. Assurances were given at that time that our Canadian soldiers would not be involved in training Azov battalion members because of their neo-Nazi beliefs. However, by October 2021, a report from George Washington University revealed that extremists in the Ukraine military were bragging about their training by Canadians as part of Op Unifier. Following that revelation, David Pugliese of the Ottawa Citizen reported that Canadian officers met with and were briefed by leaders of the Azov battalion. Apparently, the Canadians were well aware of the Azov leaders' neo-Nazi beliefs, but their only real concern was that the media would expose the fact that the meeting took place. Unfortunately for them, these officers and diplomats allowed themselves to be photographed with the Azov leaders. Those images were later used by Azov as propaganda. In 2022, Radio Canada further reported evidence that soldiers of Azov, identified by their unit patches and insignia, had participated in training with CAF instructors in 2020 at the NATO-funded Zolochiv Training Center in western Ukraine. While emphatically insisting to media that all steps were taken by the CAF instructors to identify potential extremists, they also conceded that Ukraine is a sovereign country, and as such, the vetting of their recruits is their responsibility. This, of course, is a total cop-out in terms of deflected responsibility. Canada is supporting the armed forces of Ukraine under the banner of shared values. Those who would glorify Nazi ideology and purport to create a racially pure Ukraine in no way represent Canadian values. The Azov Brigade's fanatical but doomed resistance against Russian invaders during the siege of Mariupol was heralded as a courageous feat of arms. However, the unit's neo-Nazi ideology cannot be overlooked or forgotten.
Now, you really have to pay attention because they've learned to hide a lot of their insignia. Now, their insignia is a lot of it is very obvious, and they wear them in the battlefield, but they've infiltrated the highest parts of the actual military. The guy I showed you, I showed you the clip, but I'm going to debunk a little bit about what he said. And again, I urge you to watch the documentary I'm going to attach below. It started way before that. It started back in World War II. There's always been these small brigades, these military kind of, outfits. They've trained kids, they've taught it in school. It is a large part of a large portion of Ukraine. Take a close look, and I urge you, and this is just, you can just go, this is just Google Azov patches, and you will find all of these different patches. They've learned to hide a lot of the actual Nazi symbols, the symbolism that they have. But they still carry certain things so that others who don't know are oblivious to it. But if you do know, you know exactly where they lie on which spectrum of what they would call Ukraine. Pretty much anything that has an A is part of Azov. Then they also carry through a lot of the old traditional Nazi kind of symbols, like the SS, where they have like the wolf pack. They have, like they do it over named animals, normally vicious animals, right? Watch the news. Watch how they will purposely blur out or not film shoulders, or try to cut the shoulders in half so you don't quite see the symbol. But I urge you to study. Go and just scroll through the thousands of badges that are Azov and try to memorize them. And once you, kind of like I teach people who've been watching my channel, you get to learn propaganda. I've studied this for decades. It'll get to the point where after you've seen them enough, I would be surprised if you don't find a single cut where you don't see badges with the Azov symbols or some type of affiliation to them on these Ukrainian soldiers' shoulders, chests, all of it. Because they're proud of it. They do it openly. Now, to dig a little deeper, now Canada has a problem, and we've had it for a long time. This is where I go back in the past. And again, I urge you, watch previous episodes, because I dive a lot deeper into this on how the government itself has not only let down people who fled, like my ancestors fled from the Nazis in World War II, but how we've allowed the families to carry on.
To dive into this latest political fiasco, Mackenzie Ray joins us from Ottawa. Mackenzie, we appreciate this. So let's go back a moment. How did this happen, and what has been the reaction so far?
Yeah, what a shocking story. The House of Commons Speaker, Anthony Rota, was the one who invited Yaroslav Hunka, who is a former Ukrainian veteran who fought in a Nazi brigade back in World War II. And Mr. Rota not only invited him, but kind of gave him some praise. Here's what he had to say in his speech in the House of Commons with Mr. Zelensky, the Prime Minister, and all the other MPs in attendance.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian Canadian world veteran.
Now, Zelensky knows he recruited specifically the Azov. He is part of this. He's in deep to it. They helped get him elected. And in doing so, Azov gained supreme power in the military.
From the Second World War, who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
Now, Mr. Roda's office says that he did not know the Nazi-linked past of Mr. Hunka when he was invited. He put out a statement saying, "No one, including my fellow parliamentarians and the Ukraine delegation, was aware of my intentions or of my remarks before I delivered them. I accept full responsibility for my actions." I asked Mr. Roda's office what accepting full responsibility means, if he's going to be resigning as Speaker. No word on that. The Prime Minister's office also said that he and his staff did not know that Mr. Hunka was going to be in attendance, nor did they know about his past associations with the Nazi Brigade back in World War II. A statement from his office saying no advance notice was provided to the Prime Minister's office nor the Ukraine delegation about the invitation or the recognition. The Speaker had his own allotment of guest seating, which were...
Okay, this has all been debunked. The Prime Minister knew about it, Chrystia Freeland knew about it, Anand knew about it, everybody knew about it. They were all out taking pictures way before this even happened. Everybody knew. I watched this happen live. I fell to my knees, I screamed, I threw my glasses, I couldn't believe it. The second they introduced him and said he fought for Ukraine against Russia, I already knew. Why was he fighting against Russia? Russia was fighting with us. Hello? You don't have to be really astute in history to really know history. You just gotta be brainwashed enough that you forget what you learned in school, or you're too young and now you have the new propaganda, the indoctrination instead of the education, to understand who this guy was. His name, believe it or not, is infamous. He's a wanted man. Now, how does it tie into my family? Well,
our own, for instance, our own Deputy Prime Minister and current Finance Minister, her grandfather was a card-carrying Ukrainian Nazi. And
that's Chrystia Freeland. What was her profession?
I mean, I'm not saying anything outrageous here. This has been in the press numerous times. And she tried to hide that for a bunch of years. But he was a card-carrying Nazi, not because he was forced into it or it was politically convenient, but before the invasion, he ran a pro-Nazi newspaper in Ukraine. So the history is there. During World War II,
she took the same profession as her Nazi grandfather. She studied propaganda. This is the Liberal Party, people. This entire party is evil. Everything about them is anti-Canadian, from their Chinese connections to how they've been stealing elections to how they've been manipulating and buying the news. Everything about them stirs the past of World War II. Again, previous episodes, I show, rest in peace, a Holocaust survivor in her speech and how she gives the exact... step by step on how Nazism and the Holocaust actually came to be. The things to watch for and not allow your government to do. The Liberals have been checking this list off one by one. There's 2 left. Take your guns and full censorship. And this is what they're trying to do in record time. But I want you to understand the entire administration, every single person that's in the administration itself knows this.
I mean, the Minsk Accords was a settlement. He won because he ran on a peace platform, promising to sign the Minsk Accords, which was an agreement that Russia, France, and Germany had all agreed to, which would have left Donbass as part of Ukraine as an autonomous region, so they can now enjoy their own language, the ethnic Russians, and protect themselves from attack by the central government, which was U.S. Installed central government, and that NATO would stay out of the Ukraine, and that's what the Russians wanted, a pledge that NATO will never go in, which we should have made for them. And we've repeatedly violated those promises, and there's people in the White House who want this war, and they've said it repeatedly.
So the whole administration knows. exactly what's going on, not only in Ukraine, but they also know what's going on here in Canada. They're presently trying to fix their past. They know the mistakes that their government has done. They're trying to fix it and trying to stop it from ever happening again. Their battle is also with Europe, who is also part of this propaganda machine thanks to NATO and the European Union. This is why Trump despises them. Now I'm going to dabble in this last part. This is a great interview. This is a bombshell that came out. I reported a little wee bit on it earlier. My hero, Sam Cooper. Listen carefully, and this is another huge thorn in Trump and the Americans' arses about Canada that your media refuses to tell you, along with everything else I always show. But Sam Cooper, the man.
Now, Sam, your findings allege the Canadian police stonewalled the U.S. government in their efforts to cooperatively disrupt a BC fentanyl lab network. And this is related to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs against Canada. First, what exactly was uncovered at this hidden super lab in British Columbia, and what transnational crime groups were behind this?
Well, it was a massive raid by the RCMP. When they investigated, ultimately, they found a half ton of hard narcotics, 54 kilograms of fentanyl, almost 400 kilograms of methamphetamine, 35 kilograms of cocaine. The weapons equally concerning, AR-15 submachine guns, explosives, body armor. So this is the type of weaponry consistent with Mexican cartel operations on Canadian soil. And the transnational crime groups involved are exactly the ones that the U.S. government has been talking to Ottawa for years now about, and that is Chinese fentanyl precursor suppliers. These are Chinese triads that are active across the Western Hemisphere, especially very strong in money laundering and drug networks in Vancouver and Toronto, Mexican cartel-style operations that have combined with, or rather come in over top of, brutal Canadian domestic gang networks that are receiving all kinds of drugs coming up from Mexico, including cocaine. So it's the worst of transnational crime operating especially in Western Canada in what is called these super fentanyl labs.
Now, the RCMP announced in October 2024 that they had dismantled this sophisticated fentanyl lab. But your investigation shows U.S. officials actually initiated the case years earlier, and Canadian police refused to cooperate. Can you walk us through that timeline?
Yes, I talked to a number of United States officials that said there was much more to the story. After the RCMP announced this stunning raid and dismantling of a lab in October 2024, I learned that the American DEA office in New Jersey, which is deeply involved in probing Chinese transnational crime networks involved in money laundering and fentanyl precursors, had come to the U.S. Ottawa embassy in late 2022, warning that they had learned of a pre-shipment of fentanyl precursors coming from China into Vancouver, along with other chemicals from China believed to be bound for this Health Canada licensed lab in the Vancouver area. So the US government, in short, was asking the Canadians at a high level, will you work with us on this case? We believe it's very important. And they asked repeatedly after 2022 and were told in baldly, no, the RCMP would not investigate and would not cooperate. So turn to October 2023, the US government under the Biden administration takes a different approach. They announced Treasury sanctions against 28 entities, all in China except for a Vancouver area businessman, and this lab are sanctioned as well. It's only after that, months after that, that Americans learned that Ottawa had started, that is RCMP, did their own investigation and yet they would not share any information back with the American teams that had gave them the intelligence. And that I was told simply from American officials, including Derek Maltz, the former acting administrator of the DA, this is unacceptable because the US government believes Canada and the United States are essentially being attacked with fentanyl by these foreign crime networks. And so there needs to be coordination and cooperation because people are dying across North America.
Well, and in your reporting, you had mentioned that the DEA acting administrator, Derek Maltz, called this case a major disaster. So what specifically angered Washington about Canada's handling of the investigation?
I was told by Mr. Maltz he didn't mince any words. In an on-the-record quote, he called the RCMP's conduct disgusting. He said that the way that Canada conducted business, withholding information from the DEA investigators who had significant ongoing investigations into these transnational networks. Remember, this involves not only British Columbia, but China, Mexico, many high-level suspects. And the RCMP conducted their raid in northern British Columbia without even informing American investigators. And so this blindsided the Americans. I was told that this could have some impact on the American investigations. And in a nutshell, this is just what the American officials, all the way up to President Trump now, are saying is a lack of coordination, a lack of cooperation, and quote, Canada has failed to arrest traffickers, seize drugs, or coordinate with U.S. law enforcement. That's what President Trump cited to senior officials. And this story, I talked to some of those senior officials, some of them on the record.
And how does this Superlab case tie directly into Donald Trump's decision just this summer to impose 35% tariffs on Canada?
President Trump's executive order cited exactly that statement. He said that senior officials have informed him since President Trump warned of these impending tariffs last fall that Canada hasn't changed. That is, Ottawa, the RCMP, have not improved and changed their efforts to work with the American government, who clearly sees this as a Western Hemisphere national security threat. And yet Ottawa has not worked on any of what U.S. officials call dated laws. And so President Trump said Canada has not assigned adequate resources and it's failing to interdict against these foreign networks. And so I was told President Trump's comments aligned exactly with the U.S. officials that explained in specific terms their concerns with the Falkland Lab, and not only the Falkland Lab, there are other labs and other botched investigations, in fact, a history of non-cooperation from the RCMP and American officials, I'm told, going back to the early 2000s.
Now, you mentioned U.S. sources told you that the Falkland breakdown was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of Ottawa refusing to share information or pursue major organized crime cases. What evidence did you uncover of the broader dysfunction?
The broader dysfunction involves cases that I've been informed of and done my own research into, where we see tremendous shipments of cocaine coming from Mexico through the United States up into Canada, investigations from Vancouver to Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, in which the Canadian government and the RCMP has been asked for years to cooperate with the DEA and other agencies. And repeatedly, the RCMP throws up roadblocks, I'm told. It's seen as stonewalling. And, the core issue here, I discovered and corroborated, is that Canada has outdated laws that results in siloed, national-focused probes that don't work with the Americans to look at this really global problem. Lack of leadership in the RCMP and at senior levels in the Trudeau and Carney governments is cited especially. And indeed, some of my sources in Canada and the United States point to questions about corruption within the RCMP and Canada Border Services Agency. In a nutshell, Canada has laws that Derek Malt said are weak, are outdated, porous borders, and as Derek Malt said, he can't mince his words. Canada has weak laws, and a lack of cooperation flows from that.
Now, this is yesterday, by the way. Just more of the truth. Sorry, so sorry. Just the truth, just the facts. The Carney government is the same Liberal Party. Nothing has changed. It's just now he doesn't have a partner who's running the strings on the puppet Biden. They've been ousted. And by the looks of the polls, the Democrats aren't going to be in power for quite some time. Canada is in huge trouble. Huge trouble. And then you get announcements like this.
Question on financing. I wonder if the government of Canada, as it did with Trans Mountain, is considering participating in an equity stake in either mineral developers or transporters of energy, or might assist with some other levels of financing as we approach the budget. In other words, other than signing partnerships, is there some tangible way the government of Canada will put some skin in the game financially to help private sector proponents?
So there's a number of different tools that we have, be it through the Canada Infrastructure Bank, through CDEV, through EDC, through BDC, through
Some
SIF.
of these are so risky, these projects, that even BDC is not going to take that risk on. That's why we bought Trans Mountain, because of the risk profile. Needed the government backing it, right?
So again, there are tools like the Canada Growth Fund that take first of a kind risk. The government is going to use all the tools it has to responsibly develop projects, to do it in a way that's responsible for Canadian taxpayers, and do it in the right environmental way and in conjunction with First Nations.
And when you speak,
This is the same thing that the turd did. He purposely put these rules in. Carney told him, the global elite told him, again, previous episodes, the only way they could take control of Canada's resources was by putting these laws in and then using Canadian tax dollars to push their chosen pipelines and then sell it to their buddies. Previous episodes, who is a major shareholder now in this TMX that was built by your tax dollars at an exorbitant rate? Brookfield. There are companies that are suing because they were promised a set rate in order for them to be able to use the pipeline. No. They're not part of the Laurentian elite and the global cabal. All of these projects that are going to be built are going to be built on your tax dollars. You're not going to receive a penny of it back. All the profits are going to go to these losers and all of their supporters and sponsors. Canada is screwed. We need this government to fall. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're new, punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. You can support the channel by buying our clothing and merch at the store, or you can donate on the website or the email address scrolling across the screen and also attached in the description. Until next time, I'm Alias Tagai. You've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. Stay informed,